Hello, everybody. My name is Martin Loffers. I'm Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. You might also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of the Dutch Supply Chain Magazine and the European Quarterly Supply Chain Movement. I will be the moderator of this webinar about an exciting topic, I would say, supply chain resilience, hyper lifestyle. So this will be recorded. And together with me, I have Alfons Willemsen. Hello, Alfons.
Hi, good afternoon, Martijn.
So this as I said, this webinar will be recorded. Afterwards, you will receive the PDF of this webinar, and you can review it or can forward to your colleagues. All the listeners are on mute, but you can start questions right away. We will have a Q&A at the end, but feel free to ask questions during the webinar. You will see a questions panel on your right-hand side, so you can type in the questions over there. And if it's in line of the conversations Alfons and I will be having, I will start asking the questions right away, so we keep it as interactive as possible. First, Alfons, could you explain briefly who you are and a bit of your background?
Yes, my name is Alfons Willemsen. I'm a partner at Involvation. Involvation, we're a supply chain consultancy firm, but we basically mix consultancy with learning, development, coaching, interim management. And our main topics where we focus on are S&OP, IBP, demand planning, inventory management, supply chain strategy, but also supply chain risk management has been a topic already for a very long time.
Right. Well, starting about supply chain risk management, why this topic at this moment?
Yeah, why this topic? Of course, we all know and feel the situation we are in since February, March. Actually, I wrote a blog or an article beginning of March before we went into lockdown here in Europe. And one of the observations I had at that point of time was that things that started to happen reminded me of the previous crisis, the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. And I asked myself, hey, but what happened and why didn't we learn? And that's also why I show here this quadrant, basically the time management matrix from Covey. Mm-hmm. And basically what you see is that supply chain risk management, and in this webinar I will talk about supply chain risk management and resilience, but supply chain risk management is typically something which is important, but not urgent if things are going well. Mm-hmm. And so what happened that, of course, when we had the first impacts of the deliveries not coming from China, you saw that the crisis started. And then, of course, after that, lockdowns and situations here in Europe and in the US and all over the world. And then you see that immediately it becomes urgent, and you see that supply chain risk management becomes a topic again. And what I believe is that it needs a different perspective, because it shouldn't happen now that after this crisis, we go back again into the kind of sleeping mode of, okay, it's gone, it remains important, but it's not urgent, so companies start spending time again and energy on other things.
So right now in the Netherlands, we are in the second wave, and you might expect this wave is predicted to to prolong until March, and maybe we'll get a third wave. Some people expect even a fourth wave, although there might be vaccines coming up. So do you still this topic remain on the agenda in the next half year, and then companies might back out to normal?
No, I think you're talking now about the current crisis, and we've got a second wave, third wave. We don't know how many waves there will be coming, but that's, again, focusing on this current situation. But there might be other things coming, and that's why I really believe that supply chain resilience, mm-hmm. and we'll go more into detail about what is supply chain resilience, that it should be a lifestyle, and that we should not only focus on quadrant one, on the do, but also on the plan. So it's not now a diet and let's fix a couple of things, like after the financial crisis, the Sarbanes-Oxley, which was a tick in the box for a lot of companies, but then structurally, basically things didn't change.
Yeah.
I think we should take this opportunity to really have a lifestyle change. That's
So
what we did.
in an article you wrote recently and published on October the 3rd, I think you're making you use a metaphor of having a heart attack and how to handle it. And could you explain why you take that example or that metaphor?
Yeah, the example is and of course it's a bit brutal maybe, but if you are obese or overweight and you have a heart attack, then it could be that when you recover at the intensive care unit and then you wake up and then you think, wow, I should have listened to my GP and I should have done more on exercising, limiting what I eat, what I drink, etc. And all the good intentions you had before, a good intention is not really things you do if it's just an intention. And probably after a heart attack at the IC unit, you realize, okay, I need to change my lifestyle. And I think a lot of companies are now kind of hooked up to the monitor still. And but if they get disconnected from the monitor, then they shouldn't go back to the old way of living and working, but it should change their lifestyle.
When you look at obese people, but you have also obese companies with a lot of inventory. And Janet Goldself from University of Warwick did a survey, did a study, a research in the UK in second quarter, March, April. And most of the companies were depending on their inventories as a buffer. But the strange thing is, you could expect it afterwards, especially that they didn't have the right inventory. So from some of the products, there was a lot of demand and they hadn't enough, and some other buffers, other inventories, were not used. So like obese, buffer management as a way of buffer for supply chain risk is not always, maybe most of the times, not the right thing to do.
No, I think you're fully right, and it's an interesting example, inventory, because you've got of course different opinions on inventory. Some say you shouldn't have any inventory. Inventory is bad when you're more from the lean school of thinking. Others have inventory as a buffer. I think the solution is you should have the right and the good inventory, and inventory can be a good solution, but it should be part of the overall solution. And I think that's also what you see happening now. And you should also realize that inventory cannot be the solution for everything. If you think about PPE equipment, mouth masks, for example, I read one of the last days that if you would really want to store it as inventory, the actual level you should need to have is 27 times what the normal level is. Yeah, forget it. That won't work. No. That won't work.
And another thing, what Janet Gottself from the University of Warwick remarked is, only 1/3 of the companies were relying on the capacity of their suppliers, to order when needed extra supplies. So that was also nothing. And let's look into the supply chain more in depth, because why is it so important to you?
Yeah, and that's if you think about risk management, supply resilience. Why is it important for supply chain? Basically, there are two elements. And the first element is complexity. And I'll just give a couple of examples here. And then we can think about dozens of examples more. But for example, first, in the supply chain, we have to deal with different flows. We have to deal with the material flow, with the information flow, with the financial flow. For example, in the previous crisis, 2008, 2009, it was basically that there was no access to external money, the financial flow, which was an issue. Now it's much more material, and not only material from raw material from suppliers, but also having your resources available, your own production units, people. But complexity is in all three flows. So that's one. The second complexity element is in supply chains, you have to deal with different silos, different functions, and then we only talk even about our own company, but let alone the suppliers and the customers. Also different time horizons. We have to deal with different footprints. I mean, if you only have one supplier, one customer, that's easy, but a lot of companies have very complex footprints, which also have become more and more international over the years. And last but not least, as an example here, is your product, the bill of material. And here we see a simple bicycle. But if your bicycle, the bill of material, if components are coming from different suppliers, and there are suppliers to the suppliers, and suppliers to the suppliers to the suppliers. So, hey, if one of your deep tier supplier is not being able to deliver, you've got an issue. Yeah. So complexity, and again, this is just a simple overview of a couple of complexities, and it's very different from business to business. But complexity is one of the reasons also why supply chain is normally quite balanced. But if something happens, then it can go wrong in a lot of different ways.
So we did a survey among 140 manufacturing companies in Europe in March, among supply chain directors and up to the executives. And we asked what kind of assessment they have been doing in March, February, March. And all of them said, okay, something about the goods flow, material stuff, inbound and outbound. And to a less extent, they were looking at information flow, looking at capacity at the suppliers, in the channels, you know, are they able to sell out, etc., etc. But only 1/3 of the respondents were saying we have also looked on a strategic level and on a financial level at the same time. So, you know, are my suppliers still, you know, will they be still around within 3 months, you know, financially? And also, that's why Unilever pre-financed their suppliers in the first quarter and second quarter, and also pre-finance their sales channel to be open to sell out. Yeah. It was only 1/3 that they, you know, they act, you know, they did assessments and act upon the strategic level.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of companies were doing. Only a few companies were looking strategically on their suppliers, and that's one. Secondly, looking more upstream to other tiers. Hardly any companies were doing that, and I think. And I hope that one of the by-effects of what's happening now is that the integration of procurement, resourcing, and supply chain is getting stronger due to this. Because still, that was very often a lot of companies different islands.
I get some question in, but you know, I have to read it, but you know, we'll get to it later. But you know. How do you depend as a company on your supply chain, and how does strategy relate to all this?
Yeah, that's the second element. I mean, complexity is the first element, which makes supply chains vulnerable to disruptions. The second one is the dynamics in the supply chain, and we can talk about again a lot of examples of the dynamics in the supply chain. But just looking at one of them, which is strategy. That has a huge impact on your supply chain and how you manage your supply chain. And here you've got the example of your strategy compass, Martijn. So it really depends on what is your strategy. Strategies can change, of course, but it starts with what is your strategy. And I think one very important thing about strategy, if you have a strategy, if the strategy is well communicated, strategy also means what you do, but also what you don't do. And that's maybe in the second picture. One of the things what you see is that with strategy, it's all about trade-offs. And here you see a simple picture from Simshi Levy on responsiveness versus efficiency. But strategy means making choices, and means also that you have to make the right trade-offs. And one of the examples which I see a lot is, for example, companies who focused a lot on efficiency. And in my article, which I wrote a couple of weeks ago, I called it efficiency anorexia. If you focus too much on efficiency, then be aware that you also sacrifice flexibility. And so if you go for full efficiency and you only have one supplier left, which is in China with long lead times, yeah, hey, then there will be issues if nothing can be shipped from China. But basically, and that's the conclusion, I think, of all the dynamics and this example of strategy. It's all about trade-offs. That's the essence of supply chain management, but it's also the essence of supply chain risk management. Realizing what are the choices, and also if you choose for one thing, you don't choose for others, but realize the impact.
Yeah. Yeah, to explain to the audience my strategy compass on the left, you see in orange you have the direction of operational excellence, call it Walmart, or for the Netherlands, call it Action, one of the fast-growing retailers across Europe, by the way. So that's the orange direction. The purple direction is the product leadership, like Apple. For the Netherlands could be Rituals, also fast-growing into Europe. And the red one is customer intimacy, like Cisco. What we saw in the Netherlands, like Action, did it very well this year, and also they had also double plans for what would happen to the sourcing out of China, and well, they had other ways to fill the shelves of their stores. So they were prepared already, and that was basically totally positioned around their strategy of operational excellence. So lowest cost supply chain, I would say.
Yeah, and my key point here is that if you have a strategy, realize what it means, and also realizes what choices you've made implicitly.
Yeah.
I think that's important to realize your trade-offs.
Yeah, I got a question here from the audience. What about increasing expectations concerning the supply chain, especially in the sustainability field, with upcoming legislation to take responsibility for the companies upstream in the supply chain?
So the impact of sustainability, you mean, on the whole?
Yeah, on the risk, and also on responsibility for companies upstream. There might also be a risk over there.
Yes, absolutely, and I think again, looking and analyzing your risk and resilience, you should look at your total chain, and there it could indeed be, for example, from a sustainability point of view, that your weakest points might be upstream in tiers where you haven't realized that there might be the biggest issues.
Yeah.
And that's why also, and we'll come to that also a bit later, I think visibility is an end-to-end visibility is one of the key elements also in getting a picture on your supply chain and identifying where are my weak spots in my total supply chain and where are my risks.
And considering the different kind of strategies, operational excellence, product leadership, and customer intimacy, I think that all directions have to deal with upstream supply chain responsibility and risk, concerning your brands, if it's a low cost or not, or is it high end. Yeah. So what you see in fashion, like the high end fashion brands are being produced in the same factories where they produce Primark clothing.
Correct. Yeah. And what's important is that resilience as a lifestyle is needed, whatever strategy you have. And can it be combined? Of course, it can be combined. But of course, the starting point always needs to be your predominant strategy. But you can build in resilience and improve on your resilience in whatever strategy.
Yeah. You have shown here a slide by David Simson-Levy of MIT in Boston, but you also have a book from Yoshi Sheffi coming up. So what is happening in 2020?
Yeah, what's happening now, of course, and this is just a couple of examples, and I could have filled probably 20 or 30 slides with just examples of what's happening now, because what we see in this year is, of course, dynamics next level. And just a couple of examples, of course, you see the automotive on the left, where you have demand impact, you have production lockdowns impact, and what we see now, and actually this is a picture from what we're modeling, you see the bullwhip in the different upstream tiers coming and actually happening. And on the right, of course, the examples which we've all seen and heard is the ridiculous hoarding of toilet paper with, of course, huge demand spikes but also the mouth masks, the sanitizers, etc. And what's different from this crisis, and that's what Sheffy wrote in his book, which he published last month in September, I think. He describes this crisis as a whack-a-mole crisis. So basically, kind of, okay, things are happening, and you think you've covered that or solved it, and then behind your back another thing is happening.
Yeah.
And that's also typically what happened in this crisis. It was not just one wave or one thing, but it was multiple demand topics, production lockdowns from country to country different, combined with a lot of uncertainty, and that made it very, very volatile and so impactful.
You know, I wrote I read a blog by Laura Cecilia, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, about the new way of supply chain planning needed in the US. Why? Because you know, the lockdowns differ per state so much, and they see all kind of, you know, diverting demand patterns across the nation. And you know, and she said, you know, we should we should forecast differently, we should distribute differently. And I was thinking, you know, that is already in Europe for the last 20-30 years, because we have different countries, and all countries are different, and they are behaving differently. And now, you know, especially they have different kind of lockdowns. In some countries, the stores are open, like in the Netherlands, and in Belgium they were closed. So I think that in Europe, companies and supply chain persons are already more apt to this environment already compared to the US, where they're thinking, you know, United States of America is one big country with some provinces called states. So what do you think? Is Europe more prepared in thinking about bullwhips and fluctuating demand patterns and as such?
I think I would agree. I think if you, and again, of course, this is very black and white, but I think in general, in Europe, we probably see stability not as much as a given as what you just described, for example, in the US. So dealing with more variations and disruptions is already more, I think, in the mindset. And they'll come back to it a bit later on what is resilience and what's different from a disruption compared to variability. Basically, it's quite the same, but the disruption is stronger and has more impact. But I think, yes, in Europe, but also if you think about company levels, companies who were more agile in their planning already are already more resilient in their way of working, dealing with differences.
Yeah, and yeah, what Mark Engel, the Chief Supply Chain Officer of Unilever, said, you know, agility beats forecasting in this kind of age.
Yeah, fully agree.
All right, we did a survey in March about the different kind of fluctuations. So what you see here, you know, it's supply and demand, and we ask 140 manufacturing companies with more than just one factory in Europe. So that are the bigger ones. And basically what you see is they got squeezed from both sides, from both on the demand side and from the supply side. So they saw extreme increases in, especially in demand, and in slightly extent also in the supply. But you know, especially in supply, there were extreme drops. You know, the ships from China weren't coming in, the containers, and also in extreme drops in demand also, especially in automotive. Whereas in, you know, automotive was locked down, or was it well, yeah, it was closed down. Whereas vehicles in the agricultural sector were still sold. So Agco was doing fine, and basically they were depending on the same suppliers in parts and spare parts and other parts as the automotive manufacturers. So Agco was able to keep on producing, whereas automotive, you know, stopped producing for a while. So that was interesting to see over there. Any comments from your side about this kind of fluctuations?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen exactly the same if we look at our customers and our contacts. I mean, some saw huge impacts on demand drops or increases in demand. It's really dependent on what type of business, which country, etc. they were in.
Yeah.
So the crisis now is very much dependent also on the context of a company.
Yeah.
Different than in 2008, 2009.
And as a result of this kind of drops and peaks in supply and demand, we also ask what did these companies see as the major bottlenecks. And as you see highlighted in red is the visibility, and not so much only the visibility of the physical goods, so the inbound flow of raw materials, number one, but number two is the lack of demand visibility from customers, so downstream. And a bit below, also highlighted in red, is the lack of visibility of capacity at suppliers. So that's not the physical goods, but are your suppliers able to produce or able to deliver? And then you get more in the supply chain resilience or risk sphere, I would say.
Yeah. Now we've done quite some exercises the last couple of months in the automotive supply chain. And that's an extreme example. I mean, there you've got the OEMs, and what you see from the OEMs, they're not the best in communicating in their upstream parties what's going. So all the suppliers upstream, they really lack demand on what's happening at their end customers, the OEMs.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the OEMs now say, oh, but we don't see what's happening in our upstream tiers.
No.
Yeah, but it's happening in a lot of changes.
Yeah, for example, you know, Henkel, German multinational, they have one of the division called adhesives, and the large part of the adhesives is supplying the automotive industry. A lot of parts in your car are glued on, and so that, you know, they were hit to a larger extent. At the same time, you know, they have a brand called Patex. And they were sold like massively in the do-it-yourself stores. So, you know, as an OEM, you don't know Henkel as a major supplier how they're doing, and you know, if they're open or not, and what they are producing. Patex for the do-it-yourself store, or industrial glue for the automotive.
And for example, also they're quite big in adhesives for packaging, and that of course is booming. So
yeah,
so they had the plus and the minus.
Yeah, but you know, as a customer, like an OEM manufacturing car company, you have to know, you want to know how they are doing and what are they producing. Maybe they're switching to one category or industry.
Yeah.
So now focusing, you know, getting into the supply chain risk management sphere. So what is the classic approach of supply chain risk management?
Yeah, the classic approach, and this is kind of a 2-minute course in supply chain risk management, which is the basic approach, and it's quite simple. And again, I simplify it, but if you look to the picture on the left, basically what's a risk? Risk is impact times probability, and that's how you can define a risk. Then so that's one. Secondly, if you want to look at what kind of risks do you have in your supply chain, then we can look at the 5 types of risks which you see at the bottom, which is basically the SCORE model: supply risk, process risk, demand risk, control risk, and you've got environmental risks. So basically a kind of a bucket with all other risks. And the classic approach is, okay, try to identify from these categories what are your risks and try to categorize them and basically build them into a risk profile. So you look at the different impacts and probabilities and you create a risk profile. And what you do with the risk profile is you look at, what's also our risk appetite? So what do we consider as a risk? Okay, we dare to take, or we can take as a company. Or what are the risks? Here, the ones in red, for example, where you say, okay, that's where we need to do something, where we need to mitigate or reduce the chance or reduce the impact, etc. That's the classical approach to risk management. And based on that, you have a plan and action.
Yeah. And your environmental risk could also be volcanoes, flooding,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the whole point. I mean, this works extremely well, and it's kind of a technical approach to risks. But if you go to the next slide, Martijn, there you've got examples, and I just listed here a few. But for example, it's on the right. It's the flooding at New Orleans, Katrina.
Yep.
You've got the tsunami, Fukushima. You've got the Thailand floods, and the Thailand floods in resilience literature. You read a lot about it because it had a huge impact on the capacity worldwide of hard disk production.
Yep.
But these are all examples of risks where, if you think about the previous approach, they are difficult to categorize on what exactly the impact and what's the chance. But we know for sure it's a very low chance, and when it happens, it has a huge impact.
Yeah, but you know, interesting. You talk about later about technology and solutions later on, but I already saw, you know, a German company originally from Germany, from Munich, Risk Methods is delivering a solution where they go through all the channels with machine learning, hundreds of thousands of news reports from all over the world, and they categorize, and you know, they connect it to certain supply chains. So upstream, they can know, you know, my tier 2 or 3 supplier is in an environment of where there will be there is a flooding going on, and you get a flag, you know, so you can be prepared on that sense of this kind of risk. And I know a startup from Austria, Prewave, is also delivering some machine learning alerts based on this kind of news to see how could it impact your supply chain. So there are solutions, but that's only a part of the solution.
Yeah,
I think
it's part of the solution. And of course, you're right. I mean, if you've got your production facility in the Panhandle in the US,
yeah,
you know, hurricanes will hit you. But you're right. It's good to have insight, but it's only a small part of the solution. Yeah.
All right. I get a question, and you can answer it probably in the next 1 or 2 slides. So what is the main difference between supply chain risk management and supply chain resilience?
Yeah, and that's thanks for the question, because that's exactly where we're coming now. I mean, in the classic approach to risk management, you've got your categories, you try to identify them, etc. But then on the previous slide, we saw that there were a lot of other risks, events that can happen, and in the theory and the literature, they are described as the unknown unknowns. And you see here also the book from Mr. Taleb from years ago about the black swan theory, and so the unknown unknowns are what's called the black swan events. So you don't know that they exist, and so therefore also very difficult to predict on what will happen, when will it happen, etc. And this is basically, if you look at the environmental risks in that model on the left, if you look at unknown unknowns, that could be on environmental, technological, social, economic, whatever. I mean, now we're talking about a pandemic, but an unknown could also be, what is it? A cyber attack. I mean, what would happen if for the next 3 weeks in our country we wouldn't have any internet? Would be quite an interesting event. So the problem is that the unknown unknowns are really events that can happen where we don't have a clue what it can be and what it could be from an impact point of view.
And we know Brexit, but we don't have a clue what will happen. So it is a black swan, but we know that it is there.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, you can plan and think what will happen with Brexit, but what would happen if there would be a riot in Scotland or Ireland due to the Brexit? That's an unknown. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
And that's also where, and then we come to the next one, why I believe that supply chain risk management, that's a basic, but basically the solution is to have a resilient supply chain. So basically, and this is just a theoretical definition, but that basically your supply chain should have the capability to be prepared for unexpected event and to go back to the normal way of operating fast. That's basically what resilient means. And I think that's also the solution to whatever event there might be. So a disruption, and whether it's then an earthquake or a tornado or whatever, but that a resilient supply chain should be able to deal with that.
Yeah. And risk management is more like what you said, a theoretical model of the probability and risks.
Yeah.
But it doesn't imply per se how to deal with it.
Correct. And unfortunately, we have again, I mean, a lot of the risk management theory and also my way of thinking comes from safety, analyzing safety. There are a lot of parallels and analogy there. I mean, we probably all saw what happened in the Formula One this weekend with all the safety measures, but still, what happened now with this impact, etc. Again, it's an unknown, and how to deal with it.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to go into that in more deeply. You know, David Cincinnati has written a methodology about supply chain risk management in his book Operations Rule.
Yeah.
It's about time to recover.
Correct.
You know, so and also what are the costs related to that? You know, so is that more risk management or is it also resilience?
That's resilience. I mean, time to recover, I think, is and his definition and how he uses it, and also makes it financial. I think it's a great measurement and KPI about resilience. The only problem is you can only measure it in hindsight, of course.
Yeah.
But being prepared for recovery, that's what I would call resilience, and TTR is, I think, a great KPI for resilience measurements. Yeah.
Yeah, there's you know, a time to survive or something like that, and a time to recover. So, you know, how long can you go on producing if all your suppliers are stopping delivering, that kind of stuff, and recover? You know, when is it shut down? How long will it take that your supplier will be able to produce again? These kind of metrics he has to do.
Correct.
And a question from the audience, you know, how does resilient supply chain relate to lean processes, and how, you know, how is it manageable, a resilient supply chain in a lean environment and lean processes?
Yeah, a good question. I think lean, and there we come to how well and how is lean implemented. If lean is implemented in a too dogmatic way, it might be that all flexibilities are gone.
Yeah.
And again, coming back to your strategy, if that's your choice, so everything is for efficiency and being as lean as possible, meaning you don't have any flexibility left, yeah, then it hurts your resilience. And that's I think also when you think about strategies and where resilience to build in and where it's more difficult is probably where you are lean or efficient. There you should really think twice. Okay, are we resilient enough if something happens? Okay, that's exactly what we see happening also with the automotive and the OEMs. I mean, everything is it's with a tech time, and you cannot change your tech time from 73 seconds to 82 or to 95. No, then it's stop or continue.
Yeah. We talked about recovery. So how does the world look like in 2020 and maybe next year?
Yeah, I mean, what's happening, and here you see on the right a model from Covey again on how companies normally respond to a disruption. So it's so you see on the time scale and you see the impact. But of course, what's happening now is it was not one disruption; it was multiple disruption.
Yeah.
And basically, I think what you see happening now at the moment is that, and I've written a couple of things here on the left. What I've seen with a lot of companies, what was happening you have to, of course, you have to jump to do, because you're in a crisis, you have to do something.
Yeah.
So what you saw was war rooms being created. You saw meetings where also the top management, C-level even, was present in normally operational meetings. All the meetings became very operational. A lot of S&OP IVP processes, we saw that basically frequency went up, became more S&OE type of meetings, so higher frequency of meetings. And also what we saw happening, which has to do also with the uncertainty, that a lot of decisions were driven by emotions and opinions instead of facts. And yeah, I think a lot of companies did a great job in surviving and doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But also a lot of companies were focusing on the firefighting and completely left out now on the tactical and longer term, which in a way makes sense. But yeah, think also about what's coming and looking forward again. And yeah. I think, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Looking at that graph on the right, with the recovery, in the economic sector, they said, will be a V-shaped or W-shaped or U-shaped, whatever. Whereas in supply chain, we'll say, no, it's a deep drop, and then it will be a bumpy ride up again. And here on this chart, it looks quite fluid, this recovery up to the normal level previously. But what we see right now, it is a bumpy road. So the recovery, it's not a fluid line back again.
Correct. Yeah.
But it's a bumpy road, and maybe dropping down again. It's like the second wave of COVID in the Netherlands and other countries in Europe.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the interesting. This is the model from Jeffrey from years ago, where it is kind of linear, one disruption.
Yeah.
But as he describes now, in this whack-a-mole crisis, it's much more disruptions happening all the time, every day, etc. And that needs a different way of working around it. So okay, I think it's even more focus on resilience, building in resilience.
So, and how do you do that? So let's get to that.
Yeah,
point.
how do you do that? And that's this is maybe quite a scary picture. This is just one of the models we are using, which we're using also in our trainings. And this is a model from Cranfield, already from 2004. Mm-hmm. Why I like it, because it high level gives a couple of the elements. So it says, okay, if you want to build a resilient supply chain, you should think about your supply chain engineering, so the design, understanding, your strategy, also for your supply base. Also collaboration, so the link with your customers, the link with your suppliers, the link with your deep tier suppliers, etc. Culture, risk management culture. I mean, if you got, and I'm using this example a lot, if you've got great visibility of what's happening, but no one dares or is allowed to make a decision, yeah, forget it, that won't work. So risk management culture. And last but not least, agility, so combining visibility and velocity. Now, this is quite a holistic approach. That makes it also difficult because, of course, the big question is, okay, but where do we start? And I think that's also what a lot of companies are struggling with, which are still in the operational mode. Okay, but how do we make this a lifestyle? How do we start? Where do we start?
Yeah, and I also sense a confusion in some industries, like in the chemicals industry, it's like safety first. Safety is more important than profit. Yeah, all right, I totally understand. But that is a culture, and it's a sound culture, but it's not enough for supply chain risk management or even resilience.
No, correct. And again, I think the analogy to safety is interesting, because there are a lot of things the same. But there's probably no company who's saying risk above everything, which is happening with safety.
Yeah.
But I think risk and resilience as a mindset, like safety, is important.
Yeah.
But you need to frame it according to your strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, if your strategy is predominantly efficiency, you want to be more resilient, but of course you want to be efficient.
Yeah, and I think safety is a necessary precaution in a lot of industries for your personnel, your associates, etc. But we talk also about business continuity. And if you talk about business continuity, there's also a question: how do you get a funding for supply chain risk management? And I say, go to your CFO and don't talk about risk management. That's the downside, the negative side. But talk about business continuity. All your CFOs want business continuity. So to me, the catchphrase is supply chain, maybe not supply chain resilience, but supply chain continuity, and where you need resilience.
Correct. And so that's one risk, business continuity. On the other hand, also, I think at the moment, now is the time to put it on the agenda. And I mentioned to a lot of companies already in the past, when they implemented S&OP IBP, it was always an agenda item to talk about risk and opportunities. And the interesting thing was that in 95% of the cases, they were talking about opportunities and not about risks.
No.
I think you should talk about both, and again also translated into scenarios for both. But now is the time to put it on the agenda. On the other hand, be careful that it doesn't dominate everything. Don't let that risk paralyze you. Again, what's your strategy and what do you want to achieve?
And another thing, and I don't know, it's related to this whole topic, but what I hear a lot lately, and I'm talking to a lot of executives in the last weeks, is there's a risk of fatigue within your company because of lockdown. Are my planners working at home still able to perform? Burnout. So there's a new risk coming up, is employee fatigue and burnout risk. So can you still do your S&OP if some planners are having a burnout? And we haven't talked about that, but there's also not a risk, and we could have foreseen it in March. Absolutely. So that your planners being sick and getting a burnout is a risk.
Absolutely. And we've seen interesting examples, for example, in air traffic control and on the railways, where it had huge impact of just one planner not being able to come to work or whatever.
Yes. So there's even black swan relating to risk management we haven't foreseen, and maybe in the air traffic control area they know it, but in the supply chain planning area they didn't realize that such a thing could happen.
Correct. Yeah.
So what is your advice talking about all this, because this is quite complex?
It's quite complex, quite scary if you see this, and so I've got basically two approaches. One approach is a very pragmatic one, like this. Again, looking at the quadrant on the right, which means that don't stop now when you are really in the do mode, but also extend it to plan. So don't stop with actions after the crisis. Because the worst thing that can happen is that hopefully, for example, in March, everything is over, and in 2 years' time, there's a new crisis, whatever unknown it might be, and we're back to zero. So don't stop with actions after the crisis. Reflect and learn. Plan, do, check, act. Take some time to reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, what should we keep, maybe the decision tree you use in your war rooms or whatever. But reflect. Use the C-level attention. We briefly touched upon it in the previous slide. Now's the attention. So be a bit opportunistic to use it. Make a plan. And again, on the left corner, you see the elephant. The previous slide, it's quite a big elephant. So how to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So make a plan, where to start, what can we do, what should we keep, etc. And implement. And don't wait with implementing. Keep the momentum going now. But think before you act, because you cannot do everything at the same time.
So interesting enough, we did a survey in June, so after the first pandemic peak crisis, among 106 manufacturing companies in Europe, and we asked in which sectors or which topics you're going to invest in the next 12 months. And sales and operations planning, you can see it still, is number one still. But the number two is end-to-end supply chain visibility. That's number two. And especially among the leading companies, end-to-end supply chain visibility is key, and not only on the real-time transport visibility, but also on capacity level and so forth and so on. Another thing highlighted in the red down below, supply chain risk management. So leading companies with a supply chain maturity level 4 or 5 on the Gartner maturity matrix scale. So the more mature manufacturing companies are looking at supply chain risk management solutions to implement, you know, to see, okay, what kind of alert do we get, not only from a tier 1 impacting, but upstream. So that's one thing. So there are solutions, and I mentioned there are startups, there are interesting solutions. So there are options and solutions about. So and maybe, you know, you should look at it. So when do you think this should be a starting point to look at that kind of? Is it more like the end-to-end supply chain visibility as a way to act, or looking at risk management solutions? Alphonse?
Yeah, I think both. The interesting thing here is what you see, that there's a striking difference between the companies with level 4 or 5 versus the overall respondents. And
yeah,
I think this fits with my hypothesis that on resilience, I believe that companies who are already quite professional in their supply chain management are probably already more resilient than others.
Yeah.
And so that's why probably also these companies are already or want to invest also in technology on visibility and supply chain risk management. Absolutely.
Yeah, and also it's not here in this graph, but I also digested companies on level 1 or 2 or 3 are still implementing WMS, warehouse management systems, and enterprise resource planning a lot. You know, because, you know,
Yep.
get your house in order, your basic orders, transport, warehouse, and commercial orders in order. So that's also interesting to see. So you have developed also a health check. So what can Involvation provide?
Yeah. So what we developed a health check. Like I said, we believe that resilience should be a lifestyle. And that's why we developed a health check. And on the left, you see the supply chain technology heat map, also linking to the previous slide. Of course, there are a lot of technology solutions which can help you, but it's only part of the puzzle. So that's why we developed a health check. And on the right, you see an example where we've got a lot of different categories, aspects, topics. Again, quite a holistic approach. And the intention of the health check is to check with the company, how well are you doing with your supply chain resilience? And also, did you improve or didn't you improve, etc., etc. So we've developed this health check. And actually, at the moment, we are cooperating with some universities where we are getting some academic input on the completeness of the topics, etc., and to validate it. So it's good to have the academic input. Our role is to make it pragmatic and to translate it to individual companies. And this check we are finalizing, and the MVP, the minimum viable product, will be available as from Q1. So it's ready to go. And it's basically based, and that's why we're now checking with the academics, is based on our knowledge, our experience, our supply chain risk trainings, our resilience trainings. But we're really translating it to a tool which we can use to help companies.
And with what kind of companies are you checking this kind of concept?
Now, the interesting thing is that we are now also making a list of companies who will be in kind of a front runner position to work with them and test the health check list. And that's quite diverse, because you can imagine that if you have no production facilities, or if you have a limited number of suppliers compared to a very difficult bill of material with products from all over the world, that the issues can be very different. So that's why we really want to set it up from a quite broad type of companies.
So one of the suggestions we heard a lot in the last month is, you know, get away from single sourcing, go to dual sourcing as a follow-up to be more resilient. Is that enough? And what do you see happening in the manufacturing world in Europe and beyond?
Yeah, again, what you see, that's again a very black and white statement, the same as what you saw in the beginning of the crisis, that, oh, this is the end of globalization. No, it's not.
No.
Moving from single sourcing to dual sourcing can be a solution. It could also be that maybe having good discussions with your single source can help to solve the same solution.
Yeah.
Having the right sourcing as a dual source is again another topic. So there are different ways how to do it, but it definitely needs another way of thinking than in the past, because it was forgotten.
And will this kind of questions also be addressed in this assessment of yours, or this health check?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the categories is, of course, looking at the supply side, at your supplier base, et cetera, the complexity of your product, et cetera.
Yeah. And you see one number, 6.5 health check here. Is it related to a score? Can you benchmark?
No. This is just a picture from Google.
Right.
So that doesn't say anything. I think again, it's how good do we want to be as a company? I think that again it should be related to your strategy and what your competitors are doing. If you're doing a 6.5 and your competitors are 4, that's also what's happening now in this current crisis. Some customers are doing extremely well. Why? Because they are better and smarter in how they react and act now compared to competitors. And some are really gaining a lot of market share.
So I was moderating a panel discussion, I think it was October or whatever, with a manufacturing company and also a big French retailer. And the French retailer was able to onboard new carriers within weeks, where others, this manufacturing company, they would take for months to onboard a new carrier. And especially during the lockdown, transportation was in need, so onboarding of new ones who were able to transport the goods was paramount.
Yeah.
But how do you consider onboarding of new carriers in your whole health check analysis?
Yeah, that's also part of the check. Transportation and distribution is definitely one of the topics which you've seen in the last half year, that it should have a different approach. And whether it's working with your own carriers or onboarding others, or, for example, one of our customers where I heard an example that at a certain point in time, it was almost impossible to book air freight.
Yeah.
And you really had a window of opportunity of hours to book something. So they really had to have a different governance structure that people could make a decision to book air freight, where in the past it would go up 5 levels. And now it was needed because otherwise the windows of opportunity will go.
We are going to the Q&A. We have a few minutes left, and we want to keep it within an hour. I have a question here from the audience saying, there's a paradigm shift, changing regarding globalization, more warehouses and depots decentralized. So is that an impact on your story?
Yeah, I think this is what you hear and read. That in the beginning of the crisis, what you saw was that issues with China. So this is the end of globalization. No, it's not. I think globalization is probably a better solution to resilience than just offshoring or onshoring. And that has an impact also on how you build your network and warehouses, etc. So yes, it definitely will have a role in how to move forward. Again, it depends on your type of business, on your customer base, etc. But probably what you did in the past needs some rethinking.
Yeah, and what I see, in the old days, it was the pendulum going from left to right, from centralization to decentralization and back. But I think also with the current technology, with the cloud systems, you can have a centralized system, a centralized platform, but you give decentralized business units the opportunity to use it freely. So I think, you know, it's not a matter of centralized or decentralized anymore. I think, you know, with a central platform, you can use a decentralized way of working.
Yeah, correct. Fully agree.
You know, we almost to the end of the hour. Actually, we are only an hour. So I don't know if there are any urgent questions. You know, we have some further readings to do. So if you have a question, type it away, or we will pick it up later on. So we have already answered the questions, a lot of questions during this webinar. So you find my contact details here. And to the left, we have done. We have created an end-to-end supply chain visibility self-assessment. That's an Excel with questions you can download, and as a result, you will get what you see, a kind of matrix with colors on different levels: upstream, internal, downstream, operational, technical, and strategic. You can see, okay, if it's all right, it's 100% colorized, and if it's not okay, you have a white spot, so you can assess your white spot. So slightly different angle from your side. And to the right, you see the contact details of Alphonse, and also a link to the article he's written about. Quite interesting story, might be a bit harsh, but you know, reality can be harsh, about obesity and a heart attack in relation to supply chain resilience. So with this, I would like to thank you, Alphonse, for you know, sharing your expertise. Are there final remarks you want to share to the audience?
No, basically not. Change your lifestyle. And for some it means that they have to drastically change, and for some they have to keep on doing what they do. But look at your lifestyle. Resilience is a lifestyle. Okay,
and be aware of it, what your lifestyle is.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Well, to the audience, thanks again. Thank you for listening. We'll make sure this recording will be available in the next 48 hours, and also the slides will be available as PDF, downloadable. So thanks again, and I hope you will join in later on in next year, probably. Thank you, and bye-bye.